You're 64, single, and retired, and you've accumulated $1.8 million. Should you consider converting some of this money to a Roth? That's what we're going to look at today. Hello, my name is John Vandergriff. I'm one of the owners and wealth planning team lead here at Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, where we help people make transitions into retirement through planning, or if you're already in retirement, making sure that you're not missing some of these vitally important areas to plan for. And so one of the requests that we had from one of our subscribers here is to have basically a copycat video made for a single person instead of a married person, just to see what the differences would be. And so if you're married and you say, oh, this doesn't apply to me, well, statistically speaking, you may be a single person at some point, hopefully as many years in the future as possible. And so this could be relevant for you. So continue to join us even if you're married today. But we're going to look at the major differences between this and the last video just like it, whenever this person becomes single, either by choice or by life or whatnot. So a couple things. If this is your first video with us, welcome. Make sure you like our channel, subscribe, so you can get more of this content, comment below. But then also you're going to notice a link in this video or below the video there, where if you have questions about tax planning, how to get some of this information to be relevant to you, click that link. You can schedule a time with one of our wealth planners. Make sure that you're able to get the information that you need, because a lot of times people don't cover this level of detail when it comes to tax planning. And so we want to make sure you have the information that you need relevant to you. So, and with that in mind, I always like to preface this by saying, you know, we're going to look at a specific situation today. Your situation could be similar but different. So don't act on any of the things that we're looking at today without consulting someone individually first to make sure you have all the information at your disposal. So with that being said, 64, single and retired with 1.8 million, very much like our 64 married and retired video. So we're going to look at the differences here. And as we've said, you know, we do planning not just in the world of taxes, but really linking all these things together. I think that's a courtesy to our clients, because too many times we get segmented in these different categories and we never really have any good overlap. So we need to make sure, you know, as you see today, we're going to talk about income and taxes. Your investments matter significantly in this conversation, so we need to keep those in mind as well. All right, single, 64, keeping our income need the same as the previous video. We're changing a few of the metrics, $10,000 of pension instead of 15. We're making Social Security relevant for a single person. No people today are getting $44,000 of full retirement income from Social Security, or if they are, that's kind of the top of the ladder. Every year they release a maximum, so it could have bumped up against that threshold, but it'd be pretty dang close. $1.8 million in 401ks, $300,000 in banks or after-tax money. So moving that money out is a taxable event. The Roth needs to be in place for 5 years before completely tax-free distributions can occur from it. And then if you're over 59 and a half, you do a conversion. That money is available, that's converted. The growth on that money would be taxable. So we've got to factor that into the decisions that we make before we make them and we realize, oh gosh, I've got a tax burden that I did not realize. All right, so this changes for a single person, $60,000 of income need. We're assuming that they have yet to file for Social Security, so they really need $50,000 from their savings until they get there. We're assuming they're pulling it from the big bucket, which is taxable. So that's why we're showing a current annual income of $60,000 a year of taxable and a top tax rate of 22%, not 12% like it was for the married couple. So again, a single tax rate, which we're going to look at, is less income that it takes to cross into higher brackets. So we've got to factor that into these decisions that we're looking at, whether Roth makes sense or not. And so again, as we look at this, and has been our custom when we have done these videos, I always like to do a bit of teaching here to talk about why a Roth could or could not make sense for a particular situation. So as we look at it, let's say that, you know, we're trying to decide if it makes sense to leave money in the 401k and not touch it versus do something else with it, That's kind of the premise of this video. So we got $100,000 that we're looking at either leaving in the 401k or migrating into a special kind of account called a Roth, either IRA or 401k, and what happens whenever this occurs. So obviously if we don't do this, nothing changes with the account balance, still grows tax deferred. If we move this money from a 401k to a Roth, and as we said, today's top tax bracket for this person is 22%. If they were able to stay in 22, then that would mean that they would have $78,000 if they paid the taxes out of this bucket. Now, most of the advice that people will give when it comes to Roth tries to squash the conversation here because they say, oh, well, you're going to make less money after doing your conversion because the market's going to grow and you're not going to get as much in this Roth as you are in the 401k. I think that's short-sighted advice because we're not looking at these buckets as different buckets. They're trying to equate them as the same. This bucket has tax-free benefits. This is fully taxable growth. So we've got to play this out a little longer and assume we're investing the same thing for the same length of time. So over that time it doubles. The 100,000 becomes 200,000. The 78 becomes 156. And you look at this and say, that doesn't change my mind. Well, it depends on what the tax environment is when you go to pull this money out. Because the Roth, we know what we have. We've got 156 all day long. The 401k, it depends on what the taxes are at the time you take it. And if that stayed at 22%, then you will notice both of the bottom lines here are exactly the same, $156,000. And so if the tax brackets don't ever change, it's a moot point. Doesn't matter what you do in this scenario. Now, most of the retirement advice that we've gotten from people is that, oh, well, your taxes are going to be less in retirement. Well, a couple factors there. That could be true for you or it could not, depending on a few things. But if it was true and your taxes went down from 22 to, let's say, 10%, you actually made a bad decision doing the Roth conversion because you would have more money stay with you, even though that money is growing taxable because the cost to leave the account was less than it was to move that money into the Roth account earlier. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case for many of our clients that we talk with, but you also have to play into the consideration what we're talking about today. If you go from a 64-year-old married couple to a 64-year-old single couple, almost assuredly your taxes are going to go up. And so again, we've got to factor that in. But even if that doesn't happen, you're single the entire time, you could still show higher taxes in the future because of bad decision in spending with our government. So as we look at that, those are decisions that directly affect this 401k that won't be a problem for the Roth account because you already paid the taxes and have received tax-free growth. So the whole point of this discussion is trying to determine when can we pay the lowest percentage tax. That's really what we're after in all the different things that we're looking at. It's just we're playing with not a full hand of information because we cannot predict the future. And so instead of using that as a cop-out to do nothing, we're going to look at the past to say what decisions would make sense based on what we know about income taxes. So as we said today, $60,000 of income just gets barely above the top of the 12% into the 22% bracket. And so we recognize that. The 2020 or 2017, which is really what 2026 will become if no changes happen, it just expires and reverts back to the way the brackets were. This is adjusted with inflation, but you notice that that 12 or what was 22% bracket now for this couple is at 25. So increase, but you say 3% is not much. For every $100,000, that's an extra $3,000 of taxes that you would be obligated to. So if you want to pay an extra $3,000, you may want to just stop watching this video. So as we look here, 1981, this is the last time taxes were significantly higher, especially on the top end, with a top bracket of 70% compared to a top bracket of 37 to 40, which is where we've gotten used to. Notice the 60% or $60,000 of income would actually be at a lower tax percentage than today. This is one of the few examples that I've seen where that's actually been the case. But if they sneeze or they have a few extra dividends or interest, they jump into the 24% bracket, which would be higher. So as we look at that, those are things that we need to factor in, but also we've got to look at a situation where, because of the low income need that this particular person has compared to the amount of savings that they've put together, very high chance that once they get to full retirement age and then have 7 years where they really don't need this money in a large capacity, they're going to grow, and let's say they grow 5% a year, that 1.8, assuming it did not increase while they were pulling a larger withdrawal, but then went up 5% for the next 7 years, would grow to $2.5 million. That would be $95,000 of RMDs. And again, same number that we used in the previous video, but this is for a single filer, not a married filer. So it becomes much more impactful when you add this $95,000 on top of a $10,000 pension and $27,000 of taxable Social Security. That gets you above $130,000 of income and changes these percentages pretty significantly. So as you look, not a huge change in today's taxes between 22 and 24% bracket, but when you compare 25 to 28, or if 1981's tax brackets start to become a reality again, we're not going to be at 21%. We're going to be at 44% at $130,000 of income, which is noticeably different. I mean, double where we're at today. So as we look at that, I think reality could be somewhere between these two numbers. So 28 to 44 for this particular person. The truth is we don't know. I mean, it depends on how much worse our debt and spending gets and how drastic of decisions the government has to start making when it comes to those. So as we look at this, we always wrap up with how much should we convert? Well, 22%, if we max that out, that's $49,000. Another $86,000 if we maxed out the 24% bracket. So that would be $136,000 almost that we would be able to convert with an effective tax rate of 23.3%. But we do have to factor in Medicare cost impact, because if we raised income above this $183,000 threshold, that's going to be an additional $5,100 of cost to Medicare 2 years from now for this particular person. So that would, if you added this to this particular situation, that would be like 26.8% cost, total cost of conversion, which for these numbers would be a little high. But once we got to factor in RMDs in the future, that may be par for the course. We may still do that. We may still look to see if, it makes sense to do a little less. But again, that's why we've got to look at several factors here for a particular situation when we're having these conversations of Roth conversion. So if someone's not talked to you at least this much about your situation, they're probably not going to. And so what we'd like to do is invite you to come and talk to us. You got a link below there. You can schedule a phone call, a Zoom call, or if you're close to Tennessee, come and see us in person. We'd be happy to sit down and see what we can do to help you. Because again, we are talking to people about this on a daily basis. We would love to sit down and see if we can help you in some way. But as far as content goes, that's all we have today. For those of you that are single, hopefully you appreciated this look at that same situation. And if you're not single, hopefully you don't become single soon, unless you want to. But hopefully you enjoyed this content. Make sure you subscribe to our page, and we'll have more for you next week. So stay tuned.